She handed her the check while I was still pouring the coffee. I don't think my mom even noticed the mug trembling in my hand. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. Either way, the moment she passed that folded white envelope across the kitchen table, all pretense dissolved. My sister Serena's smile widened like she'd just won something. Because she had. My inheritance. It wasn't just the money, it was everything that came before it. The Sunday phone calls, she never returned the wedding. She didn't attend the time she forgot my birthday, but remembered Serena's favorite wine. You're sure you want to give it all to her? I heard myself say, still holding the coffee pot like a prop in a play I hadn't auditioned for. My mother blinked like I'd asked her if she wanted more sugar. Honey, she needs it more than you, she said, voice wrapped in that tight smile she always used when she wanted to end a conversation. And you're doing fine. I was doing fine. I worked 2 jobs, drove a 10-year-old Corolla with no air conditioning, and lived in a rented duplex where my neighbor blasted 80s metal through the walls every night. But sure, I was doing fine. Serena, on the other hand, lived in a 3-bedroom craftsman my mom helped her buy with a husband who called her babe and a kid who wore designer sneakers to daycare. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just nodded. And that was when it started. Not the betrayal that part had been brewing for years. What started that day was the unraveling of whatever illusion I still held that I was part of a family. A real one. Equal, wanted scene. I watched Serena tuck the envelope into her purse like a casual tip at brunch, and I smiled back at both of them as if I hadn't just died a little inside. They thought I'd accept it, that I'd swallow it down like I always had. But something cracked open in me that morning. Something sharp and ancient and quiet. They had no idea what I'd already done. Or what I was about to do. Because while my mother was busy giving away what should have been mine, I'd been making a few quiet moves of my own. Moves that would change everything. Starting with the house. The one she'd lived in for 32 years. The one she always said she'd never leave. The one she assumed she still owned. Except she didn't. Not anymore. The thing about my mother is she never thought I was smart. She thought I was dependable. Responsible. The one who would refill her pill organizer, shovel her driveway, take her to her appointments when Serena was too overwhelmed with the baby. But smart, no. That role belonged to Serena, the golden child with the trust fund smile and the messiah complex. That's why she never thought twice about leaving the reverse mortgage documents in a drawer I'd cleaned out for her a dozen times. It was under a stack of takeout menus and a scratched-up birthday card she'd never sent. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. And what I found made my blood run cold. My mother didn't own the house anymore, not fully. Years ago, in one of her just-in-case moves, she'd taken out a reverse mortgage without telling either of us. Probably hoping she'd be dead before it mattered. But it did matter. Especially because the terms made it very clear if she ever moved out or passed away, the house would be sold to cover the loan. Or someone could buy it out first. Someone like me. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't have the money outright, but I'd been working quietly with a real estate attorney I met through my side gig. I pulled from my modest savings, leveraged a low-interest personal loan, and applied under my business name. No one would see my signature on anything until it was too late. I didn't even tell my boyfriend, which is saying a lot, considering how we usually overshared everything from therapy sessions to favorite sandwich spreads. It took 6 months. 6 months of acting like everything was normal. 6 months of Sunday visits and polite lies and pretending not to notice when Serena made comments like, "Mom says you're still renting. You should really start thinking about building equity." 6 months of smiling through family dinners where my mother bragged about how Serena was planning to start her own business, a wellness brand, that sounded suspiciously like an overpriced Etsy store. And then it happened. My lawyer called. The deal had gone through. The lien was paid, the mortgage closed, the house title officially transferred. I owned it. I owned the house my mother sat in every evening watching Jeopardy. The house where I learned to ride a bike on the cracked sidewalk out front. The house where Serena threw a fit at 13 because she didn't get a pony for her birthday and locked herself in the garage. I didn't feel triumphant, not yet, but I felt ready. 2 weeks later, I sent the letter. It was short, formal, direct. Notice to vacate. She called me crying. My mother. The same woman who hadn't cried when Dad died, or when Serena ran away at 16, or when I moved out quietly in the middle of a thunderstorm because she told me I was taking up too much space. "Why would you do this?" she whispered. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was ugly. Because you gave my inheritance to the daughter who didn't need it. Because you used me like a maid, a chauffeur, a nurse, and never said thank you. Because you thought I would never fight back. Instead, I said because it's time you understood what it feels like to be left out. And then I hung up. The silence after that call was deafening. But I wasn't alone in the quiet. Not anymore. Because someone else knew my secret. And he was about to use it against me. He wasn't supposed to be there that night. It was a Tuesday, the kind of drizzly spring evening when everyone hunkers down under blankets and forgets the outside world exists. I'd gone to my house now, to check the locks, make sure the gutters hadn't clogged up from the storm. And I'll admit it, to just be there, alone, in the quiet. But when I opened the back door with my new key, someone was already in the kitchen. At first, I thought it was Mom. I even started rehearsing some sharp line like the letter wasn't a suggestion. But when the shadow turned around, it wasn't her. It was Marcus, Serena's husband. Jesus, what the hell are you doing here? I asked, my voice louder than I meant it to be. He looked just as startled. I could ask you the same thing. I own the place now, I said, raising my eyebrows. You? He hesitated, then held up a small bag of tools. Your mom called. Said the sink was leaking again and asked if I could check it out. I narrowed my eyes. How noble of you. Marcus chuckled, but there was something off in his smile. Something familiar and dangerous. Didn't expect to see you here. You can go now, I said flatly, but I could feel the tension thickening between us like fog. We hadn't been alone in a room in almost a year. Not since that night. Back then I thought it was a mistake, a lapse, a blip in an otherwise boring life. He was drunk, I was lonely. I'd cried on his shoulder about Mom, and he'd leaned in, a hand on my cheek, a breath too close, and then a kiss I never told anyone about. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but it did. And I knew from the way his eyes scanned my face that night in the kitchen he remembered too. You look tired, he said. Don't, I snapped. Don't what? Don't try to make this about anything other than what it is. I sent the letter. She needs to move out. That's it. He stepped closer. You sure this isn't about Serena? What do you mean? He shrugged. You're not the only one who's been watching from the sidelines. It was a strange thing to say, and an even stranger tone he used to say it. But I didn't want to know. I couldn't afford to want to know. Tell my mother not to send you over anymore, I said. If something's broken, she can call a plumber like anyone else. Marcus didn't leave right away. He lingered for a beat longer than necessary. Then as he walked past me toward the door, he stopped just briefly and whispered, You always deserved more, you know. I should have let him leave. I should have walked away. But instead I stood there, heart hammering the words hanging in the air like smoke. You always deserved more. And when I turned to look at him again, I saw it in his eyes, the question, the invitation. That's when I crossed the line. I didn't speak, I just stepped forward, so did he. And the kiss this time? It wasn't accidental. It was slow, deliberate, charged. And it was wrong. But neither of us pulled away. We didn't speak as he drove me home. The rain had started again, soft at first, then louder, drumming against the roof of his truck. The silence between us was heavier than it had any right to be. Not awkward, just full. Like the aftermath of something sacred and shattered all at once. I stared out the window, pretending to count the streetlights, pretending not to notice how his knuckles tightened on the wheel every time we stopped at a red light. He didn't try to touch me again. He didn't say sorry. He didn't say anything. And that scared me more than if he had. When we pulled up in front of my apartment building, he finally glanced over at me. His mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to explain or confess or ask. But all he said was, Do you want me to come up? I shook my head too quickly. No, this was a mistake, he finished. But neither of us really believed it. I got out without another word. I didn't even look back. But once inside, once the door clicked shut behind me, I let the guilt crash in like a wave I'd been bracing for all night. I sat on the floor of my kitchen and let my head fall into my hands. Because it wasn't just that I'd kissed my sister's husband, again. It was that I wanted to do it again. And that part of me, the part that had always been invisible in this family, finally felt seen. That's what terrified me most. The next morning, the world hadn't ended. The sun came up. People walked their dogs. Kids waited for school buses. My coffee tasted exactly the same. But everything was different. I ignored 3 calls from Serena. I couldn't face her voice, her casual superiority, her unshakable belief that everything in the world was hers by birthright husbands, houses, happiness. But I didn't ignore the call from my mom. I'm not leaving, she said, skipping hello entirely. It's not your choice anymore, I replied, keeping my voice even. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Mom. Maybe Serena can use her inheritance to help you. That silence on the other end, it was bitter. It meant she understood. She knew exactly what I was doing. And she hated me for it, but not more than I hated myself for needing to do it. I spent that week working overtime trying to bury myself in tasks that didn't require emotional bandwidth. Grocery lists, client emails, grouting tile in the kitchen. But every time I paused, even for a second, my thoughts slid back to him. Marcus. What did he want from me? Was it guilt? Was it defiance? Was it real? The questions spiraled. So when he texted me late Friday night, just a simple, "Can we talk?" I hesitated only a moment before replying, "Not here." Because even if I didn't want this to be something, even if I was still pretending I was in control, I already knew it was something. It always had been. And we were both about to fall even deeper. The motel room smelled like old cigarettes and new lies. We didn't pick it for romance. It was off the highway tucked behind a gas station that sold warm wine coolers and scratch-offs. It was the kind of place where nobody looked twice at a man and a woman checking in separately, then entering the same room 10 minutes apart. I stared at the frayed curtain, wondering how I got here. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, his hands resting on his knees, shoulders tense. "We can't keep doing this," I said softly, not even looking at him. He didn't answer at first, just nodded like he agreed with me, like he was trying to convince himself. But then he said, "Do you think we're the only ones in this family who lie to themselves?" That caught me off guard. I turned to face him, arms crossed. What's that supposed to mean? He leaned back slightly, exhaling. "Your mom? She's been lying to herself for years. About Serena, about you, about the kind of mother she's been. And Serena. She lies to herself every time she posts a picture of us smiling, as if our marriage isn't crumbling behind the scenes. And me," I asked, my voice hollow. "What am I lying about?" He looked at me then. Really looked. "That you don't love the way this finally makes you feel powerful." The words were a slap and a kiss all at once. And the worst part, he was right. Because I did feel powerful. For once I wasn't the one crying in the kitchen or getting left out of the will. For once I wasn't invisible. I was the storm in this story. I sat beside him, not close, not touching, just breathing the same heavy air. "This can't go anywhere," I whispered. "I know. I'm not Serena. I know that too. And yet, we kissed anyway. Not because we were in love, but because we were two broken people orbiting the same sunburned wound, a family that gave too little and took too much." He left first. I waited 10 minutes, then followed. Back in my apartment, I stripped my clothes off and threw them in the hamper like they were evidence. I scrubbed my skin in the shower until it turned red. But nothing washed off the feeling, the mix of guilt and want, and something that felt dangerously close to justice. I hadn't set out to destroy my mother's life, or Serena's. But wasn't that exactly what they'd done to me, in slower, more polite ways? I didn't need revenge, not in the cinematic sense. I needed freedom, and maybe that meant burning the whole damn legacy to the ground. The eviction date was coming fast. I knew Mom wouldn't leave easily. But what I didn't expect was Serena showing up at my door 3 days later. No warning, no smile. Just her standing there in a trench coat and fury, her arms crossed like a lawyer ready to go for the jugular. "You bought the house," she said flatly, "and you're kicking her out?" I nodded. "You're pathetic." I waited a beat before answering. "She gave you my inheritance, and you knew." Serena's lip twitched. "So what, you think you're some kind of martyr now you bought her house, Natalie? That's psychotic." I stepped closer. "You never liked living in her shadow. Well, congratulations. You won, she picked you, and I don't owe either of you anything anymore." She scoffed. "You know she's not well. You know this will break her. Maybe, or maybe she'll finally learn what broken feels like." Serena stared at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw something unfamiliar in her eyes. Fear, not because I had the power, but because I was willing to use it. She turned to leave, but before she did, she said something that clung to me long after the door slammed shut. "Marcus told me everything." She said it like a warning, not a wound. "Marcus told me everything." She didn't scream it. She didn't cry. There was no slap across the face, no dramatic collapse into the hallway like in some made-for-TV meltdown. Just that calm, clipped tone Serena always used when she wanted to hurt you with precision. Like she'd been waiting for this moment, like she knew. And maybe she had. Maybe she'd known all along. I stood frozen for a full 30 seconds after she left my hand still on the doorknob. My mind tried to chase it all, how much she knew, when she knew what Marcus actually told her, what version of the truth he decided to serve. And the ugliest question of all, why hadn't he warned me? My phone buzzed. A text. "Marcus, she knows, I'm sorry." Just that, nothing more. No explanation, no defense, no plan. The fallout came faster than I expected. 2 days later, my inbox lit up with a notice from a lawyer representing my mother. She was contesting the sale, claiming elder coercion, that she hadn't fully understood the terms of the reverse mortgage, that I'd manipulated her, that I'd acted in bad faith. I read the words 3 times, my stomach tightening with every line. Bad faith. As if I'd schemed this. As if I hadn't sat for years in the background of every family photo holding the tray, pouring the drinks, smiling through invisibility. But I knew how this would look from the outside. A strange daughter buys aging mother's house and evicts her. A strange daughter has affair with sister's husband. A strange daughter becomes villain in her own bloodline. The headlines practically wrote themselves. I called my lawyer. She was calm, methodical. She assured me the paperwork was airtight, the mortgage legally satisfied, the transaction final. She doesn't have a case, she said. But my mother had something more dangerous than a case. She had a story, and in this family the story always beat the facts. I didn't hear from Marcus for days. When I finally did, it wasn't a text. It was a note, a folded scrap of paper shoved into my mailbox, no envelope. Just 5 words. I didn't tell her everything. I read it over and over again as if it contained a code I was supposed to crack. Everything. What hadn't he told her? That it happened twice. That I wasn't the one who kissed him first. That he'd said he loved me once in the dark, while her voice played through the baby monitor from the next room. I didn't know if I wanted to be protected or exposed. I just knew I couldn't survive much more of this limbo. I burned the note in my kitchen sink. Not out of rage, but out of desperation. 'Cause I was starting to realize something chilling. I hadn't just bought the house to reclaim my power. I'd bought it to destroy the world they built without me. And somewhere deep down, I wanted them all to burn with it. The court hearing was scheduled for the following week. But the war had already begun. Serena posted a photo that night on Facebook. Her mom and Marcus on the front porch of the house. My house. Captioned some things can't be bought, like family. The post went viral in our small town. The comments poured in. Stay strong, Mrs. Rowe. How could a daughter do that to her own mother? That other one always gave me weird vibes. That other one? I was being erased again. But this time not quietly. This time with confetti. So I did the one thing no one expected. I walked back into the house. Unannounced. Uninvited. And I brought someone with me. Someone none of them had seen in 15 years. He hadn't stepped foot in that house since the funeral. My older brother Daniel. The one who vanished after Dad died. Who cut ties with all of us and moved across the country. Who sent me a birthday card once 5 years late. The ghost in our family portrait. The only person whose silence made mine feel less lonely. And now he was standing beside me on the porch of the house we were both born in. I didn't even have to knock. Serena opened the door before I could raise my hand. She froze in the doorway like she'd seen a ghost. Her face went pale. Daniel, she said, her voice brittle. Hi, Serena, he replied casual. Calm. You look stressed. She stepped aside as if her body did it involuntarily. Daniel walked past her and into the living room like it was still 1997 and Mom was making pot roast. I followed behind him, slow measured, soaking in the expressions as they turned to see us. Mom was sitting in her recliner, wrapped in a thick blanket, sipping tea. She saw him and nearly dropped the cup. Daniel, she breathed, her eyes widening. Mom, he said simply. Then he turned to me. Where do you want to sit? It wasn't a question for comfort. It was a statement of support. I chose the arm of the couch facing everyone. He stood beside me like an anchor. What is this? Mom asked. Why is he here? Because I asked him to be, I replied. Because I need someone in this family who doesn't look at me like I'm disposable. You're not disposable, she said quickly, defensively. You're just difficult. Daniel snorted. That's rich coming from the woman who once left her kid at soccer practice because she lost track of time. Serena rolled her eyes. Oh, please, don't pretend like you were ever around long enough to care. Daniel didn't flinch. I left because I cared. Because I saw what this family was turning into, and I couldn't be part of it. But Natalie. She stayed. She took care of you. She held this mess together, and you repaid her by giving her half a breadcrumb while you baked Serena a damn bakery. Mom's face flushed. She bought the house behind my back. She saved the house from the bank, Daniel said, cutting in. I saw the mortgage documents. You were months away from defaulting, and you knew that. You just thought you could guilt Natalie into saving you without expecting anything in return. The silence was a slap. Serena opened her mouth, but Daniel turned to her. And you. You married a man who hasn't looked you in the eye in 2 years, and you still act like you're the moral compass here. You don't know the first thing about loyalty. Her face stiffened. Excuse me? Don't worry, I'm not here to unpack your marriage, he said coldly. But I am here to support my sister, and I'll be at the hearing next week, as a witness, as family. Mom's mouth parted slightly in shock. But you don't? I do, Daniel cut her off. I always did. I just couldn't survive this house long enough to show it. He turned to me. Ready? I nodded, too stunned to speak. We walked out the front door together. As I closed it behind me, I heard Serena's voice rise in a whisper that barely carried. She's not going to stop, is she? And for the first time since this began, I smiled without guilt. Because no, I wasn't. I was done being polite, done waiting to be chosen, and I wasn't alone anymore. But Marcus, he was. Because Daniel wasn't the only one who had vanished from Serena's bed that night. He showed up at my door at 3 a.m., not for sex, not for comfort, but for shelter. Marcus looked like hell. His collar was wrinkled, his eyes swollen from crying or drinking, maybe both. He didn't say anything at first, just stood in the hallway outside my apartment with a duffel bag hanging from one shoulder, like a kid who missed the school bus and didn't know how to ask for help. She kicked me out, he finally muttered. I didn't ask why, I didn't have to. She went through my phone, saw your name, saw the motel address. I didn't even try to lie. I stepped aside and let him in. Not because I forgave him, not because I wanted to restart whatever messy, dangerous thing we'd set fire to, but because for once, I wanted someone else to feel as disoriented and displaced as I had for most of my life. And Marcus, he was now orbiting in that same void. He sat on my couch like he didn't know how to be still. His hands kept rubbing together. He looked smaller somehow, less like Serena's husband and more like the version of himself I'd seen that first time we kissed wounded, searching human. I didn't mean for any of this, he whispered. Which part, I asked. The cheating, the lying, or the pretending? He looked up sharply. I'm not pretending anymore. You still married to her. He didn't answer. That's what I thought. I started to walk away, not in anger, just exhaustion, when he stood suddenly. I think I loved you first, he said. Before Serena, I just didn't know it yet. That stopped me. Not because I believed him, but because part of me wanted to. I turned slowly, my voice softer than it should have been. Do you remember the night you brought her to dinner at Mom's for the first time? You held her hand like it was gold. You looked at her like she was the sun. Marcus nodded. She was the sun, until I saw the burn marks. We stared at each other, the space between us alive with regret and things that could never be unsaid. I don't need you to love me, I said finally. I need you to leave me out of your wreckage. He nodded slowly. Can I sleep here tonight? Just tonight. I hesitated, then gestured toward the couch. He didn't ask for anything more. That night, I lay awake in bed listening to the storm of my own thoughts and the soft rhythm of someone else's breathing in the next room. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't tragic. It just was. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. Marcus was in the kitchen making it exactly the way I liked, which unnerved me more than if he'd gotten it wrong. I'll leave today, he said, handing me a mug. I just needed a night to feel like a person. I took the coffee and nodded. Serena's already telling people you manipulated me, he added. I smirked. Tell her to take a number. He looked at me then, not with longing, not even with regret, just quiet recognition, like he saw me for the first time without the filter of his marriage or my resentment. Whatever happens in court, he said, I'm on your side. That's a dangerous place to be. I've lived dangerously, he said with a sad little laugh. But never honestly, not until you. And with that he left. No kiss. No promises. No pretending. Just the creak of the door and the echo of a man finally choosing truth over comfort. The hearing was in 3 days. Daniel was prepping statements with my lawyer. Serena was spiraling online crafting half-truths for likes and pity. Mom hadn't spoken to me since the confrontation. But I had a secret. A real one. A final card no one knew I was holding. Because hidden inside a shoebox in my closet was a stack of letters. All written by my father. All addressed to me. All kept from me by my mother. Until I found them last month while cleaning out her attic. And one of those letters, it changed everything. He wrote, if you're reading this, it means she never told you. The letter was dated February 11th, 2008, 2 weeks before Dad died of a sudden heart attack. I remember that time like a watercolor blur. Serena sobbing into a pillow. Mom silent, barely eating. And me just floating, trying to be useful, making casseroles no one touched. Answering calls, picking out a tie for the funeral. I never even knew the letters existed, until I found them tucked into a battered shoebox under the rafters of the attic. I'd gone up there to help Mom look for old family photos for her lawyer part of her campaign to paint me as the bitter daughter who turned her back on love. Instead, I found truth. 17 letters, all addressed to me, unopened, untouched. And the first line of the top one shattered me. If you're reading this, it means she never told you. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor for hours, reading them in silence as dust swirled in the thin sunlight slicing through the cracked window. His words were soft, reflective, regretful, and revealing. I left the lake property in your name because I know she won't. You've always been the one who carries the weight in silence, Nat. That strength deserves more than leftovers. I'm not always proud of how I loved you, but I see you. I've always seen you. The lake property. I'd forgotten it even existed. It was a small cabin, not worth millions, but not nothing either. Our family used to go there every summer until Serena got bored of mosquitoes, and Mom declared it needed too many repairs. I thought it had been sold long ago, but it hadn't. Dad had transferred it to me quietly. The deed was attached to the last letter tucked into the envelope like a final act of rebellion. Mom never told me. She'd let me believe I was left with scraps while Serena got the credit, the comfort, the cash. I couldn't stop shaking. Not because of the money, but because of the years lost, the love withheld, the proof that even in death my mother had tried to erase me. But not anymore. I handed the documents to my lawyer the day before the hearing. She flipped through them, eyebrows raised. This changes things. You think it'll help? She looked up. It's not just about legality now, it's about character. You didn't scheme this. You reacted to years of erasure. This shows motive, intent, and more importantly, it shows neglect. Neglect. That word kept ringing in my ears. I hadn't thought of myself that way, neglected. But wasn't I, not just by Mom, but by Serena, by Marcus, by the story they'd all been telling where I was the cold one, the difficult one, the outsider. They'd cast me as the villain in a story they wrote without asking who I was. But tomorrow they'd hear my version, and it would be devastating. That night I visited the lake cabin. I hadn't been there in nearly 2 decades. It was dusty, yes. The roof sagged, the shutters were cracked, but the dock was still there. The one Dad helped me build when I was 11, the one where I cried after my first breakup, the one where I once found Serena kissing the neighbor boy and swore I'd keep her secret, and I did. Because I always kept their secrets. Until now. I sat at the edge of the dock with my feet dangling in the water and let the cool silence wrap around me like a second skin. I thought about forgiveness. How people throw it around like it's the ribbon on a gift. But sometimes the best you can offer is truth. And the truth was this. I didn't hate my mother. I just stopped believing she'd ever love me the way I needed. The courthouse was cold. The walls echoed with the nervous energy of dozens of broken families, trying to resolve things with signatures and silence. When our case was called, I saw Serena sitting beside Mom, her jaw tight, her outfit pristine. Marcus wasn't there. Daniel sat beside me, steady as ever. The judge asked for opening statements. My mother's lawyer painted me as ruthless. Mine painted me as forgotten. Then I stood, and I read the letter, not the one with the deed. The first one. If you're reading this, it means she never told you. And in that moment, I saw something I thought I'd never see. Tears in my mother's eyes. Real ones. But it wasn't remorse. It was recognition. For the first time, she saw what she'd done, and it broke her. She didn't cry for me. She cried for herself. Because when I finished reading the letter, my father's voice echoing from beyond the grave tender and pointed my mother didn't reach for me. She didn't apologize. She didn't shake her head in denial. She looked down at her hands, as if trying to remember what they had done. The courtroom stayed silent. Even the judge didn't interrupt. For the first time, the weight wasn't mine to carry alone. Daniel looked over at me and gave a small nod like a quiet exhale. My hands were trembling, but my voice hadn't cracked. I had said what needed to be said. My attorney followed with copies of the mortgage documents, the deed transfer, and photographs of the cabin. When the judge asked whether my mother had ever disclosed the inheritance to me or acknowledged the letters, she stayed silent. Serena, of course, couldn't resist. She's manipulating this entire situation, she snapped. You have no idea what Natalie is capable of. She seduced my husband. Objection, my lawyer said immediately. That is not relevant to the property dispute. The judge waved it off, but I didn't look away. I stared straight at Serena and whispered, you didn't lose your husband because of me. You lost him because he finally saw you for who you are. Her face flushed. Rage flickered there, but she swallowed it down like she always did when she realized she was losing control. The rest of the hearing passed in a blur. The judge asked questions, lawyers argued details, but I could already tell how it was going to end. I wasn't going to be the villain in their story anymore. Later that evening, the judge's ruling arrived. The property sale stands. My ownership is valid. My mother has 30 days to vacate. There was no grand celebration, no champagne, no smug satisfaction. I just sat on my apartment floor again, the same floor where I cried the day Mom handed Serena my inheritance, and exhaled. It was over. At least the legal part. The emotional part, that was just beginning. The next morning, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find a familiar face, older now but unmistakable. Mrs. Donnelly, the neighbor from across the street from Mom's house. She held a small paper bag and looked up at me with soft eyes. "I heard what happened," she said. I braced myself for judgment, but she handed me the bag. Inside was a slice of peach pie. "I always thought you were the kind one," she said, "the one who kept everything together. You deserved better than how she treated you." I blinked back tears. "Thank you," I managed. She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded envelope. "Your father gave this to my husband the week before he passed," she whispered. "Said it was in case things didn't go right." I never opened it, thought maybe now's the time. She left before I could say more. I shut the door, hands trembling. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, my father's handwriting shaky, but familiar. "If this reaches you late, just remember, love doesn't come in even measures. Sometimes we give what we can even when it's broken. But you, Natalie, you were never broken, just buried. It's your time now. Take it back." I sank to the floor, the pie untouched, the silence holy. That weekend I visited the house. My house. Not to gloat, not to push, but because I needed to see it one last time before everything changed. Mom was out, Serena too. Boxes were stacked near the front door. I wandered the living room, the place I'd once sat cross-legged during Christmases while Serena opened double the gifts. I stopped by the hallway mirror, stared at my own reflection. And for the first time, I saw myself not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman who rewrote the ending. Then I heard it. Footsteps behind me. A presence I didn't expect. Marcus. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a girl, maybe 15, long dark hair and eyes like his. He saw my confusion and nodded. "My daughter," he said softly. And just like that, a new secret unraveled. She was the secret Serena never knew about. Marcus didn't say it out loud, he didn't have to. It was written all over his face and hers. The same jawline. The same nervous glance sideways. She clutched the strap of her backpack like it was armor. Her eyes flicked between us, uncertain. "She wanted to meet you," he said gently. I just stared. Not out of judgment, but out of something deeper, more fragile. Understanding? Of course Marcus had secrets. Everyone in this story did. But this was a new kind of betrayal, a different flavor of grief. Serena had no idea her husband had fathered a child before they ever met. And now, with their marriage crumbling and my family's shame unraveling in public court, here stood the one person who bore the quiet scars of it all. "What's your name?" I asked, my voice softer than I'd heard it in weeks. "Celia," she said, "but most people call me C." She was beautiful. Not in the over-polished, curated way Serena strived for, but raw, real. You could tell she was used to being told half-truths, used to waiting outside while adults argued in other rooms. "I didn't bring her to mess with you," Marcus said. "She's been asking questions. I didn't want her to hear about everything from the internet." I nodded slowly, my mind spinning. "Where's her mother?" He hesitated. "Gone. Cancer. Years ago." Celia didn't flinch, just looked down at her shoes. "It's okay," she said. "It's just a fact now." I felt something inside me shift. Because in that moment I realized something painful and pure. No matter how much chaos we try to escape, someone younger always ends up inheriting the fallout. We sat in the kitchen. Celia picked at a scone from the bakery down the block. Marcus and I didn't eat. "I used to come here when I was little," Celia said, glancing around, "before school. But I don't think anyone knew." "You were here?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah. My mom and I would drive by. She'd point and say, 'That's where your daddy's family lives.' I thought it was like a fairy tale, a big fancy house with too many secrets." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was heartbreakingly accurate. "You're not wrong." Marcus sat quietly, his hands folded, guilt radiating off him like heat. "Why tell me now?" I asked. He looked up at me. "Because you were the first person who ever saw the real me, even when you shouldn't have." That answer didn't absolve him, but it made sense. When they left, Celia gave me a small hug. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not hating me." I knelt down and looked her in the eyes. "You're not something to hate, C. You're the one innocent thing that came out of all this." She smiled, but it trembled. As they disappeared down the street, I stood alone on the porch of the house I once called a battleground. And something strange happened, for the first time in my adult life. I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. The moving truck came on a Thursday. Mom didn't speak to me. She didn't have to. The way she looked at the floor instead of my face told me enough. She had lost, yes, but more than that, she had finally been forced to reckon with the ghost of the daughter she tried to forget. I stood on the curb as Serena loaded the last box into her SUV. She walked over, arms crossed, sunglasses shielding her expression. "I hope you're happy," she said. I tilted my head, not happy, just finally seen. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg, but then she stopped, because there was nothing left to say. She climbed into her car and drove away, her taillights disappearing down the street like the last flicker of a dying fire. And just like that, the house was mine. But more importantly, so was the silence. So was the peace. So was the ending. Or so I thought, until I found the final envelope tucked beneath the floorboards in the upstairs bedroom closet. It wasn't from my father. It was from my mother, dated just 3 days before the hearing. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, or you finally won." That was the first line. Her handwriting was shakier than I remembered, more fragile. But it was unmistakably hers. The same script she used on birthday cards, permission slips, passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. I sat on the bare floor of the upstairs bedroom, the one Serena and I once shared and read. "I wasn't a good mother to you, I know that. I've always known it, but I couldn't say it. You were the quiet one, the one who didn't ask for much, and because of that, I gave you even less." I blinked. It's not that I loved Serena more. It's that I understood her more. She demanded attention. She required me. You never did. And I mistook that for strength, for distance. Maybe I wanted to believe you didn't need me so I could justify how I kept failing you. When your father died, I lost more than a husband. I lost the one person who reminded me how to love gently. He used to fight for you when I didn't. He used to say, "Natalie's the one who'll save us if we let her." I didn't listen, because letting you save us meant admitting I needed saving. I pressed the paper against my chest. It shook there, not from grief, not from rage, but from something far more disarming. Complicated forgiveness. I knew about the cabin she wrote. I found the deed years ago in his dresser drawer. I didn't destroy it. I didn't claim it. I just left it. Because deep down I knew it was his way of giving you something he knew I never would. You were never the villain, Natalie. You were the reminder. And I couldn't look at you without seeing all the versions of myself I failed to become. By the time I reached the end, the ink had smeared in places. Her last lines were jagged, but the last sentence was clear. "If I ever learn to be small enough to say sorry, I hope this letter reaches you." I sat in the bedroom until sunset, holding the letter like it might evaporate if I let go. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something had been taken from me. I felt like something had been returned. In the weeks that followed, the house changed. Not all at once, but piece by piece. The curtains were replaced, the floral wallpaper torn down, the photos reorganized. For once, my face was framed on the hallway wall, not just Serena's. Daniel visited often. He helped fix the porch. We even started talking about turning the lake cabin into a retreat. Something healing, something mine. Marcus sent one last text before moving to Portland with Celia. "Thank you for letting me break open, even if it broke everything else." I never replied. Some things are better left as echoes. A month after the court ruling, I hosted a dinner. Small, simple. Just Daniel, a few neighbors, and a woman I'd met at the bookstore who made me laugh so hard I forgot the sound of my mother's sigh. We sat around the kitchen table, the same table where Mom once passed Serena that check. But this time it was different. This time I was at the head. Not for power, not for revenge, but because I had finally chosen myself. Fully, quietly, unapologetically. And when I looked around at the laughter, the candlelight, the mismatched dishes from a life patched back together, I knew something with certainty. This wasn't the ending. This was the beginning. A beginning I built from ashes and broken letters. A beginning I never needed permission to write. The house doesn't creak the same anymore. Maybe it's the new floorboards Daniel helped install in the upstairs hallway. Or maybe it's just that the ghosts are quieter now, not gone, not forgotten, but finally acknowledged. My mother's perfume doesn't haunt the bathroom tile the way it used to. Serena's laughter no longer echoes off the walls with that familiar edge of triumph. The kitchen hums with something else now. Peace. Or the beginning of it anyway. I've started keeping a journal. Not like this story, not confessions or court-ready truths, but small, quiet observations. things like, "Today I made coffee without remembering her hands. Celia sent a photo from Portland, she's smiling. I didn't flinch when I passed our old church." They seem small, these entries. But I'm learning that healing doesn't show up in dramatic moments. It creeps in between ordinary things. You only notice it when you realize what's missing: the ache, the dread, the silence that used to feel like punishment. Daniel has started calling it the Yellow House. He says it sounds lighter than Mom's house, or the place where it all happened. I painted the shutters last week, a soft, buttery yellow, the kind of color my mother would have called impractical. It makes the house look kinder, more like a home. We've hosted 2 Sunday dinners now. The first was awkward, too many forks, too many pauses. But the second one felt easier. Daniel brought his new partner, a quiet man named Reese, who makes excellent risotto. My bookstore friend Mara brought homemade wine. And I brought stories. Not the painful kind. The funny ones. The kind that remind you why families are worth fixing, or at least worth building anew. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photo. Serena standing beside our mother, both of them on a park bench somewhere warm. Their faces looked tired, older, but softer. On the back, in Serena's neat handwriting, were just 4 words. "We're figuring it out." No signature, no apology, no request. Just a seed. I didn't frame the photo, but I didn't throw it away either. I tucked it into a drawer in the hall, next to my father's letters, and the deed to the lake cabin. Some nights I walk the perimeter of the property barefoot, just like I did when I was a teenager, escaping the noise inside. But now the noise isn't rage, or disappointment, or neglect. It's the sound of life returning, of weeds turning into wildflowers, of broken women learning to bloom again. And then came the final letter, this time from the estate office. They'd completed the audit of my mother's assets, and included was something none of us expected: a late amendment to her will, dated 3 days after the hearing. She'd changed her beneficiary. Not Serena, not Daniel, but me. Not because I'd won, but because she finally understood what it meant to lose something worth keeping. She left me the last thing she had. Her stories, boxes of journals, unsent letters, even early drafts of recipes she used to swear were secret. I spent hours with them, reading the things she could never say aloud. And in between the ink and hesitation, I found her. Not as a mother, not even as a villain, but as a woman, flawed, frightened, trying. And suddenly I wasn't angry anymore, because maybe the cruelest part of betrayal is the silence afterward. But the bravest part is choosing to write back. Forgiveness didn't arrive like a flood. It tiptoed in like a cat, slow, quiet, unsure if it would be welcome. Some days I opened the door wide and let it curl up next to me. Other days I slammed the door shut and pretended I didn't hear it scratching. Healing isn't linear, they say, but no one tells you how awkward it is to forgive someone who never asked to be forgiven. And yet, there I was, sitting on the front porch of the Yellow House, rereading my mother's final entries. One of them was dated the morning she moved out. I saw Natalie's face today. She didn't look angry. She looked free. And that was the first time I understood what I had done, not what I took from her, but what I failed to protect. It wasn't an apology, but it was close enough to reach across years of silence. Serena didn't return to town. Not for the holidays, not even for Mom's estate proceedings. She sent her signature via overnight courier. No note, no explanation. And yet, through the grapevine of neighbor whispers and social media breadcrumbs, I learned she and Mom moved into a small coastal cottage in South Carolina. I imagined Serena wandering the beach with overpriced sunglasses, calling realtors and therapists in equal measure. I didn't hate her anymore. That surprised me, because I had built an entire fortress out of that hate. It had walls, a drawbridge, battlements, but now it was just rubble. I still remembered what she did, but I no longer felt like I had to carry it. Marcus never reached out again. I thought I'd wonder about him more than I did, but I didn't. I imagined him raising Celia, trying to unlearn every selfish instinct he'd built his marriage on. Maybe he started therapy. Maybe he remarried someone quiet. Maybe he never kissed anyone without thinking of how badly he'd hurt 3 women at once. Whatever his ending was, it no longer belonged in my story. That too was its own form of closure. The lake cabin became my refuge. Daniel helped me fix the roof. Reese built a fire pit out back. Mara helped me paint the front door sage green, saying it brought calm energy. I started writing there, not just journals, but real stories, fiction, essays, personal reflections that made my throat ache and my fingers tremble. And then one day Mara read one, I think you should share this, she said, handing it back to me across the porch table. Who would want to read a story about a woman who evicted her own mother? I asked with a half smile. She looked me dead in the eye. Every woman who's ever been told to shut up and smile while bleeding. That was the first time I considered that maybe my shame wasn't something to hide. Maybe it was something to offer. A year after Mom passed, I self-published a short memoir. I changed the names, softened the edges, but the bones were mine. My mom gave my inheritance to my sister, so I bought her house and evicted her. That was the working title. It stuck. At first I expected outrage, judgment, maybe even Serena showing up with a cease and desist. Instead I got emails, hundreds, from women I'd never met. Women who'd nursed their dying parents while their siblings took the inheritance. Women who had been left out of wills, out of photos, out of entire family histories. Women who had kissed the wrong person and paid the price in silence. They didn't ask if I was proud of what I did. They thanked me for saying it out loud. One email stopped me cold. It was from Celia. She wrote, "I read your story. You didn't blame anyone. You just told the truth. Thank you for not erasing me. I think about that hug you gave me sometimes. It felt like someone was finally saying, you get to exist too." I sat in my car after reading that, sobbing into my coat sleeve. Not because I was sad, but because I had never expected to be part of someone else's healing. Now, when people ask me what the book is really about, I give them the same answer every time. It's about inheritance, not money, but pain, and what we choose to pass on or not. Because at the end of the day, this story was never about the house. It was about the parts of ourselves we bury in walls, under rugs, in locked drawers we're too scared to open. And it was about what happens when one woman finally decides to unlock them. They called me cruel. Whispers in the grocery store. Side eyes at the post office. An old friend from high school who messaged just to say I always knew there was something cold about you. But I wasn't cruel. I was just the first one to say enough. Enough of swallowing hurt with a smile. Enough of earning my place in a family that counted me last. Enough of waiting for love to come from people who only knew how to take. Cruel is selling your daughter's future for convenience. Cruel is pretending fairness when you're carving up loyalty behind closed doors. What I did wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And in the end, honesty cost me less than pretending ever did. The yellow house still stands. Not in defiance, but in peace. Daniel visits once a month. Sometimes we sit on the porch and talk about Mom. Not as saints or villains, just as people. Human, broken, trying. We light a candle for her on her birthday now. It's quiet, no big ritual. Just a flame and maybe one of her lemon bars if I can bring myself to bake. The photo Serena sent, the one of her and Mom on the bench, is now in a frame. It sits on the bookshelf across from the fireplace. Not as a symbol of reconciliation, but of acknowledgement. Some things don't need to be fixed to be seen. Mara still calls me the poet of grief. She laughs when she says it, but I think she means it kindly. She moved in 2 months ago. The guest room is now an office. Her tea collection takes up a whole cabinet. And sometimes when she thinks I'm not watching, she places her hand gently on the hallway walls, like she's blessing the past before walking through it. We don't talk about marriage, not yet. But love lives here now. Not the desperate kind. Not the kind you beg for or earn. The kind you build slowly. Cup by cup, step by step. One night I got an email. No subject line. Just 2 words. I see. From Serena's old address. I didn't reply. But I didn't delete it either. Some wounds don't need conversations. They just need witnesses. It's been 2 years now. The memoir did well enough that I got invited to speak at a panel on family estrangement. I stood behind a podium in a room full of women who had similar eyes, tired, determined, searching. I told them the truth. That sometimes healing means losing everything you once begged to keep. That sometimes forgiveness is not about reopening the door, but locking it behind you with love. And that reclaiming your story doesn't mean rewriting the past. It just means owning your place in it. This is my place now. Not because I won it, not because I earned it, but because I stopped waiting for permission. They still whisper sometimes, but their whispers don't shake me. Because I know the truth. I didn't burn the house down. I just refused to live in a room with no windows. And when the smoke cleared, I built something better from the ashes. A home, a truth, a life that finally belongs to me.